The ice. It sings the song of death, Anya felt, the vibration in the ground alerting her even before her tired eyes could distinguish the first crack. Ahead of her, the colossal buffalo felled by her spear lay like a mountain of flesh on the treacherous surface. 71 degrees below zero, hunger was a sharp blade hanging over her village, and she, a deaf, elderly widow, was their only hope. But as the icy abyss opened beneath her feet, threatening to swallow her vital prey, she knew that her people's true fight for survival was far from over. Anya didn't hear the sharp crack of the ice, but she felt every tremor, every subterranean moan that propagated across the vast white expanse. Her feet, calloused by decades of walking, were her most faithful ears. The crack, once a thin line, now widened, a cruel smile on the lake's face. The buffalo, a 5,000-kilogram giant, began to slowly tilt, pulled towards the dark abyss. A shiver, colder than the Arctic air, ran down Anya's spine, but it wasn't from fear. It was the urgency of a mother, a grandmother, a leader. Her heart, though weary, beat with the strength of 1,000 drums. She could not fail. The promise of food was so close, and death by starvation stalked her grandchildren. With a grunt of determination, Anya knelt, feeling the vibration of the ice beneath her hands. She needed to act fast before the buffalo disappeared forever. Her eyes swept the landscape in search of something. She saw a piece of twisted wood, frozen on the distant bank. It was small, but perhaps it could serve. The elder knew she couldn't get too close to the unstable edge. The ice around the buffalo was a spiderweb about to break. The first task was to stabilize the carcass. She untied the thick reindeer hide rope she carried at her waist, an inheritance from her late husband. It was Anya's only hope. With slow, calculated movements, she crawled backward, away from the crack, until she felt a firmer area of ice. There, with the tip of her spear, she dug a shallow hole where she buried one end of the rope, fixing it as an improvised anchor. Next, with the other end of the rope, Anya needed to reach the buffalo. The distance was dangerous, but the need was greater. She lay on her stomach, distributing her weight, and began to cautiously slide towards the colossus, pushing the rope ahead of her. Every inch was an eternity. The silent sound of the ice cracking in her mind was deafening. She felt the fragility of the surface beneath her body, like a thin layer of glass about to shatter. Her muscles ached, but the image of her village's hungry faces propelled her. Finally, she reached the buffalo's hind leg, which was still on a less compromised section of ice. With her gloved hands, feeling the biting cold of the metal and frozen flesh, she firmly looped the rope around the animal's massive leg. It wasn't ideal, but it was what she had. With the buffalo partially secured, Anya retreated, pulling the rope with all her might. The effort was monumental. Her arms trembled, her shoulders burned. The buffalo barely moved, but the tilting stopped. For a moment, the threat of total submersion was contained. She gasped, the vapor of her breath freezing in the air. The ice still groaned, but the immediate urgency had been mitigated. The battle, however, was only just beginning. Anya knew the pause was brief, a mere breath before the next challenge. The buffalo, though halted, remained an inert mountain, half submerged in the icy water seeping from the crack. Her eyes, accustomed to the white vastness, now fixed on the Herculean task ahead. Pulling 5,000 kilograms alone was unthinkable, but the word impossible did not exist in the vocabulary of a woman who had survived countless winters and the loss of a great love. With her gloved hands, Anya felt the ice, sensing the vibrations of danger. She needed more support, a lever that would multiply her strength. She remembered the twisted piece of wood spotted on the bank. It was her only chance. With renewed effort, She unearthed the anchored end of the rope and crawled to the bank, keeping her body low to the ice, distributing her weight with the wisdom of one who has danced with danger for many decades. Every movement was a test of endurance. The icy wind whipped her face, but Anya didn't feel the cold, only the urgency. She reached the firmer bank. With her spear, she began to dig, unearthing the piece of wood. It was a sturdy log, curved by time and the harsh climate, heavy and frozen, but perfect for what she had in mind. Dragging it back to the lake would be another challenge, but the sight of the object in her hands ignited a flame of hope in her weary chest. With the wood firmly grasped, Anya returned to the ice with renewed purpose. Her plan was simple but risky, to create a support point, a fulcrum for the lever. She crawled to the most stable part of the ice, away from the main crack. There, with the tip of her spear and a sharp stone, she began to carve a shallow, wide hole in the ice so that the log would fit snugly without slipping. The work was slow and exhausting. Her muscles screamed, and with every blow, the ice groaned in protest. Sweat trickled down her forehead, freezing instantly on her eyelashes. But Anya did not stop. The image of her grandchildren's hungry eyes, the promise of warmth and food for her village, was her fuel. Finally, the hole was ready. Carefully, she positioned the wooden log, fitting it in. It was a solid and secure base. Now, the next step, to loop the rope again around the buffalo and pass it over the log, creating the lever. With the rope already attached to the animal's leg, Anya, prone, slid to the log. She lifted the heavy rope, feeling the buffalo's weight, and passed it over the log, pulling it to her side. Her fingers, though gloved, felt the roughness of the frozen hide. With the rope over the improvised fulcrum, Anya moved away, positioning herself to pull. She took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. This was the moment. With all the strength she had left, ancestral wisdom, and the determination of a lioness mother, she pulled. The log groaned, the ice cracked, and the buffalo, slowly with a sucking sound, began to move. Only a few centimeters, but enough to rekindle hope in her heart. The battle was far from over, but Anya felt victory a little closer. Anya pulled again, and the log groaned under the tension, the ice cracking in response to the colossal weight of the buffalo. The creature, still half submerged, dragged itself a few more centimeters, a wet, heavy sound accompanying its slow advance. Every fiber of Anya's body screamed in protest. Her arms, thin but forged by a life of hard labor, trembled uncontrollably. Pain was a constant companion, but the elder could not afford to give in. The image of her grandchildren's hungry eyes, especially little Boar, with his cracked lips and the empty gaze of one awaiting the end, was a whip to her soul. She released the rope for an instant, gasping. The vapor of her breath formed small clouds that dissipated in the frozen air. She sat on the ice, her gloved hands massaging her aching wrists. Her deafness, which isolated her from the world of sounds, sharpened her perception of vibrations. She felt the ice beneath her, a living surface, still groaning and creaking, but now with a different, less threatening tone. The buffalo was firmer, but not yet safe. With a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, Anya stood up. The biting cold tried to penetrate her fur clothes, but her determination was a fire that warmed her from within. She repositioned herself, adjusting the log for a better angle, seeking to optimize the leverage. The wisdom of her late husband, the great hunter, echoed in her mind. He always said that nature taught patience and cunning, not brute force, and Anya, even without hearing him, had learned that lesson in every winter she had faced. She gripped the rope again, her knuckles white under her gloves. This time, she did not pull with the same desperate urgency, but with a rhythmic cadence, using her body weight, leaning back, feeling every muscle work in unison. It was a slow, exhausting dance against inertia and ice. The buffalo responded, centimeter by centimeter, dragging itself out of the icy embrace of the water. The sucking sound diminished, replaced by the heavy friction of the carcass on the ice. The sun, a pale, distant disk in the Yakutian sky, began to dip, dyeing the landscape in orange and purple hues. Time was an enemy as relentless as the cold. Before total darkness swallowed the lake, Anya needed to move the buffalo to an unequivocally safe area of ice. Her eyes swept the surface, identifying the thickest, most solid part where the cracks dared not extend. That was where the giant had to go. With every pull, every breath, Anya felt life drain from her body, but the life of her village was more important. She thought of her daughter, who awaited her with eyes full of apprehension, and of the other elders who trusted her. It was not just a buffalo, it was proof that hope could still flourish, even in the cruelest lands. Finally, with one last monumental effort, the buffalo was dragged out of the danger zone. The carcass now rested on a vast expanse of firm ice, a mountain of food and salvation. Anya released the rope, her hands trembling so much she could barely hold her spear. She fell to her knees, not from weakness, but from overwhelming relief. Silent tears streamed down her weathered face, mingling with frozen sweat. She had succeeded. The first step of her people's salvation was complete. Exhaustion dominated her, but a warmth, deeper than any fire, radiated from her chest. The legend began to be written in her heart. The sun was indeed a pale, dying ember, casting long, distorted shadows over the vast expanse of ice. Anya, kneeling, felt the icy air penetrate every layer of her garments, but the warmth of victory enveloped her. The buffalo, a monument of flesh and hope, lay safe, but reality set in. The village was days away, and this 5,000-kilogram giant would not move on its own. Exhaustion, which adrenaline had muffled before, now embraced her tightly, threatening her with endless sleep. Her gloved fingers touched the rough hide of the buffalo, feeling the promise of life it represented. But how to bring that promise home? Darkness fell quickly, bringing an even more intense cold, capable of freezing the very soul. Anya knew she couldn't simply leave the animal there. Predators, attracted by the smell of blood, would soon come. Wolves, perhaps even bears, could steal what she had achieved with such sacrifice. The elder closed her eyes for an instant, seeking strength within herself. The image of Boar, her youngest grandson, with his large, hungry eyes, appeared in her mind. He was so small, so fragile. It wasn't just him, but all the faces of the village, the children, the elderly, the mothers. The responsibility weighed more than the buffalo itself. She could not fail now. With a groan of effort, Anya stood up. Her body protested, every muscle ached, every joint creaked. She needed a plan, and fast. She looked at the sky, at the first twinkling stars, cold and distant. There was no time to return to the village and ask for help. The journey back would take days, and the prey would be lost. The only option was to spend the night there, protecting it, and wait for dawn to try something. Anya began to work, moving slowly at the limit of her endurance. With her spear, she began to cut blocks of ice, piling them around the buffalo, creating an improvised barrier. It wasn't a fortress, but it would serve to hinder predators' access and protect the meat from the biting wind. Her movements were methodical, born of a lifetime of battling the elements. Each block was heavy, and the cold penetrated her gloves, numbing her fingers. As she worked, the elder felt the solitude of the vast white desert. There was no sound, only the wind whispering ancient stories and the occasional crack of the ice. Her deafness, which sometimes isolated her, was now a blessing, sparing her from distant howls. But the sense of danger was palpable, a constant vibration in her feet and in her heart. With the barrier minimally constructed, Anya nestled beside the buffalo, seeking its residual warmth. She covered herself with the fur blanket from her pack. She would not sleep, she could not. Her heavy eyes would remain open, watching. The night would be long, cold, and dangerous. but feeling the warmth of the animal and the ice, a new determination bloomed. She had rescued it from the abyss. Now she would rescue it from the darkness and take it home. The journey was far from over, but hope, like a solitary star, shone brightly, guiding her through the Yakutian night. The Yakutian night descended like a heavy, merciless cloak. Anya, nestled against the buffalo's icy flank, felt the animal's residual warmth, a small campfire in the ice desert. Her eyes, heavy with fatigue, swept the darkness, searching for shadows, vibrations in the ice that would betray predators. Her deafness sharpened her perception. Every crack, every gust of wind was felt in her feet, hands, and heart. The cold was a constant presence, an invisible enemy. Anya tightened her fur blanket, but the ice seemed to penetrate to her bones. She thought of her yurt, the fire, her daughter's herbal tea. A heavy sigh escaped, a frozen mist. It was not weakness, but a longing for distant comfort. The image of Boar, her grandson, with eyes wide with hunger, was a beacon in the darkness. It was these eyes and those of all the children in the village that kept her awake. She felt the weight of responsibility as a driving force. It was not just her, but the hope of the community. The buffalo, giant and inert, was more than meat. It was the promise of life, of overcoming. The hours dragged on, slow and icy. Anya fought against sleep, pinching herself, rubbing her arms. Her body cried out for rest, but her mind refused to give in. She remembered the stories of her people, of elders who faced harsh winters, of hunters who defied death to feed their families. Resilience was not a choice. It was the essence of her existence. Suddenly, a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration ran through the ice. Anya tensed, her heart pounding. It was distant movement, perhaps the wind, perhaps an animal. She leaned down, her palm on the ice, trying to decipher the message, nothing more. Just the vast and oppressive silence of the Arctic. Was her mind playing tricks, fatigue turning shadows into threats, or a real warning? She could not risk it. Her eyes swept the darkness again, more attentive. Anya thought of her husband, the great hunter. He would have known what to do, sensed the danger before her. Sadness hit her, but she pushed it away. There was no time for grieving. He had taught her to be strong, to trust her instincts, to read nature, and now she needed to use everything he had passed on to her. As the hours passed, the darkness began to yield slowly to a grey hue on the horizon. The sun was still far away, but the promise of dawn was a balm for her exhausted soul. The cold, however, seemed to intensify before dawn, as if the night made one last effort to retain its grip. Anya felt her lips cracked, her throat dry, but the sight of the approaching light renewed her strength. The horizon tinged with pale shades of pink and purple, a silent spectacle of brutal beauty. The ice barrier seemed fragile under the faint light, but the buffalo was there, intact. Deep relief washed over her, replaced by new concern. Day had come, but transporting 5,000 kilograms of meat to the village remained monumental and insurmountable. Anya knew the journey was far from over. Dawn brought not the end, but the beginning of a new and arduous stage. The dawn, which promised a new day, brought with it the harsh light of reality. Anya, though relieved to have saved the buffalo from the icy abyss and protected it through the night, felt the weight of 5,000 kilograms of meat on her tired shoulders. How would she move this mountain to the village? The question echoed in her mind, colder than the Yakutian wind, heavier than the animal itself. Exhaustion, which the night had barely contained, now threatened to fell her. Her muscles screamed, and her mind, once so focused, began to waver. She felt the rough hide of the buffalo, sensing the cold emanating from the carcass. Dismembering the animal there, in the middle of the lake, would take hours, perhaps days. And each piece, exposed to the air and predators, would be a new challenge. The image of Boar, her grandson, with eyes sunken with hunger, squeezed her heart. There was no time for slow methods. The village needed food, and it needed it now. But the task seemed insurmountable for a single woman, no matter how strong and determined she was. Anya closed her eyes, seeking the ancestral wisdom that had always guided her. Her husband, the great hunter, would have a plan, but he wasn't there. She was alone, or so she thought. Despair, a rare emotion for her, began to creep in, an icy whisper in her soul. She stood up, her knees creaking, and began to walk in circles around the buffalo, her eyes sweeping the horizon, seeking a solution that didn't exist. Suddenly, a subtle vibration, different from those she had felt during the night, ran through the ice beneath her feet. It wasn't the familiar creak of the lake, nor the tremor of a solitary predator. It was a rhythm, light but constant, like multiple measured footsteps. Anya stopped, her body tense, her spear in hand. Her eyes, accustomed to the darkness, tried to pierce the morning mist that still hung over the ice. Her heart, which had previously beaten with the urgency of the task, now quickened with a mix of apprehension and a glimmer of hope. The vibration grew, clearer, closer. Small figures began to emerge from the mist, distorted and ghostly on the horizon. They were not wolves nor bears. They were humans. A small group, perhaps 5 or 6 people, moving cautiously over the ice. Anya felt a lump in her throat. Her daughter Lena and her older grandchildren, perhaps even some young people from the village. They had come. Lena, her daughter, was at the front, her face etched with worry, but her eyes fixed on Anya. Beside her, her eldest grandson, Kyle, a strong 16-year-old, carried a smaller sled, pulled by 2 sled dogs. Behind them, other familiar faces, young and old, pushed other empty sleds. They had not waited. They had defied the cold and the danger of the ice to find her. Anya felt a wave of overwhelming emotions, relief, gratitude, and a hint of irritation for having risked so much. But upon seeing Lena's eyes, full of frozen tears and unconditional love, the irritation melted away. Her daughter ran to her, arms open, and hugged her tightly. Anya, deaf, felt the tremor of Lena's silent crying, the warmth of her daughter's body against hers. Kyle approached, his eyes shining with admiration and concern. "Grandma, we knew you could do it," Kyle exclaimed, his voice choked with emotion. Anya didn't hear the words, but she read the emotion on his face, in his urgent gestures. She squeezed her grandson's hand, a tired but genuine smile blooming on her lips. The others approached, their faces exhausted but full of hope. They had brought ropes, axes, and, most importantly, the strength of unity. The burden, which once seemed insurmountable, was now divided. The task of transporting 5,000 kilograms of meat was still monumental, but it was no longer impossible. Together, they could do it. Dawn, once just a reminder of the challenge, now transformed into a symbol of renewal and hope, a testament to the unbreakable human connection that flourished even in the most brutal winter in history. The journey home, with the buffalo, began to take shape, not as the end of an ordeal, but as the beginning of a new legend. The journey home, with the buffalo, began to take shape, not as the end of an ordeal, but as the beginning of a new legend. Lena's embrace squeezed Anya with a strength that transcended words, and the elder felt the warmth of filial love radiate through her exhausted body. Her daughter's tears, wetting her skin, were a balm for her soul. Anya returned the hug with the same intensity, a gesture that spoke of relief and gratitude. She looked at Kyle, who gestured enthusiastically, his eyes shining. Anya didn't hear what he said, but she understood the joy and pride on his young face. She rested her hand on her grandson's shoulder, a gentle smile on her lips, and he squeezed her hand in response, a silent pact of strength and unity. The other villagers approached, their faces etched with the worry of the search, but now illuminated by the sight of the elder and the buffalo. They didn't speak, but their gazes, Their nods conveyed respect and admiration. Anya felt the collective energy, a current of hope that ran through her. The burden that had once weighed only on her shoulders was now distributed among everyone. Lena, wiping away her tears, began to gesture to Anya, indicating the sleds and axes they had brought. Her movements were clear and decisive, showing that, despite the emotion, the practical Yakutian mind was at work. Anya nodded, understanding. The task was monumental, but no longer solitary. Kyle, with the energy of youth, was already moving ahead to inspect the buffalo. He ran his fingers over the animal's thick hide, his eyes wide with its colossal size. Lena approached her mother and with slow, precise gestures explained the plan. They would divide the buffalo into smaller parts, using axes to cut the frozen meat and bones. Then they would load the pieces onto the sleds, which the dogs would pull back to the village. Anya watched Lena's lips, reading every word, and a nod of approval was her response. The ancestral wisdom of the elder blended with the strength and organization of the new generation. With a renewed purpose, the villagers set to work. The strongest men, led by Kyle, wielded their axes, their blows echoing in the icy silence of the lake. The buffalo meat, frozen to the marrow, slowly yielded, releasing the strong scent of blood and life. The women and younger ones, including Lena, prepared the sleds, spreading hides to protect the meat and tying the ropes firmly. Anya, though exhausted, did not stand idle. With her spear, she helped separate the pieces, her experience guiding the movements of the younger ones. She felt the ice beneath her feet, the vibrations of the axe blows, the energy of teamwork. The sun, now higher in the pale sky, illuminated the scene of effort and cooperation. The cold was relentless, but the incessant activity kept their bodies warm. Everyone's gloved hands worked in unison, a ballet of determination against nature. Each piece of the buffalo, carefully cut and loaded, was a step closer to salvation. Kyle, sweaty and breathless, paused for an instant and looked at Anya. He didn't need to speak. The look of admiration in his eyes, the silent gratitude, was all Anya needed to feel that her struggle had not been in vain. Human connection, forged in adversity, was the most powerful force that existed. The village, united, was about to conquer the most brutal winter. The villagers, invigorated by each other's presence and the magnitude of the hunt, worked with almost ritualistic synchronicity. Kyle, with the strength of his youth, led the dismemberment, his axe blows against the frozen buffalo meat firm and precise. The sound, a dry, heavy crack, reverberated in the silence of the lake. Anya felt it as a constant vibration in her feet, a rhythm of life and purpose. Lena, with Yakutian agility and experience, guided the women and young people. They prepared the hides on the sleds, carefully packing the meat, protecting it from the wind. Their fingers, agile despite the cold, tied the ropes with firm knots, anticipating the long journey. Anya, though exhausted, did not allow herself to rest. Her keen eyes observed every movement. She moved between the groups, her spear serving as support and occasionally as a tool to help separate a stubborn piece. Her presence was a beacon of wisdom, a silent reminder of the ancestral strength that had brought them there. Kyle, sensing his grandmother, paused for an instant, his eyes seeking approval. Anya, with a nod of her head and a tired but warm smile, conveyed her pride. He understood. Communication transcended words, a language of glances and touches that spoke of generations of love and resilience. The sun, which had been a pale promise, now climbed higher in the sky, though its warmth was almost imperceptible. The light, however, revealed the vastness of the task. The buffalo, even dismembered, was a colossal amount of food. Each piece was heavy, requiring the combined effort of 2 or 3 men to be lifted and placed on the sleds. The vapor of everyone's breath mingled in the icy air, forming a mist that hung over the site. No one complained. Fatigue was a small price to pay for the life of their people, for their survival. Lena, her cheeks flushed with effort and cold, approached Anya. Her gestures were slower now, fatigue beginning to show. She indicated the full sleds and then pointed to the rest of the buffalo. Anya understood the unspoken question. Would there be enough space for everything? The elder touched her daughter's shoulder, a gesture of comfort and confidence. She knew the provision was abundant, and if one sled was not enough, they would make another. The priority was always to ensure that nothing would be wasted. As the hours passed, the pile of meat on the sleds grew. The dogs, accustomed to hard work, waited patiently, their eyes attentive to their master's movements. Kyle, with a group of young people, began to tie the sleds to each other, forming a caravan that would be pulled by the available dogs. The sight of that mountain of meat, carefully packed and ready for the journey, filled Anya's heart with deep gratitude. It was not just food, it was proof that, together, they could overcome any adversity. The sun was already beginning to dip again, and the cold, which had slightly lessened with the activity, began to intensify again. Anya knew they needed to leave before total darkness fell. The journey back would be long and dangerous, but now they were not alone. The village, which had waited in despair, now moved with purpose and hope. The elder looked at the buffalo, now reduced to a smaller carcass, but transformed into hundreds of kilograms of life. She touched the ice, feeling the vibrations of the completed work. The silence filled with the promise of a future. The legend, which had begun with her solitary courage, expanded to embrace the strength of her people. The journey back, laden with hope and food, was about to begin. The journey back, laden with hope and food, was about to begin. Kyle and the young people tested the sled bindings, ensuring the security of the monumental load of meat. The sled dogs, accustomed to hard work, waited impatiently, their muzzles releasing vapor into the icy air. Lena approached Anya, her eyes questioning. Anya, reading the apprehension, touched her daughter's arm, a gesture of confidence. The journey would be brutal, but the spirit of her people was stronger than any winter, a truth that resonated in her exhausted chest. At Kale's command, the caravan moved. The first few meters were a struggle, the weight of the meat and the friction of the ice demanding immense effort from the dogs and the men pushing the sleds. Anya felt the vibration of the ice beneath her feet, every creak and crack conveying the difficulty of the advance. She walked beside Lena, observing the fatigue on her daughter's face. Lena, attentive to any weakness in her mother, looked constantly, but Anya kept her gaze fixed on the pale horizon, an unshakable rock of resilience. The pale sun descended, and the cold bit again with renewed ferocity. Temperatures dropped rapidly, threatening to freeze the moisture in the air and on their clothes. The villagers, wrapped in their thick furs, pulled and pushed, their bodies hunched against the biting wind. Every step was a victory. The oppressive silence of the white desert was broken by the muffled howls of the dogs, the creak of the sleds, and the heavy sound of footsteps on the compact snow. Anya, exhausted, felt an almost mystical energy from the earth. The promise of life they carried, the future of the village, depended on her. She thought of Boar and the children, whose hungry faces were the fuel for her determination, warming her heart and propelling her. Kyle, with youthful strength, was a tireless engine, but Anya noticed the tension and the burden of responsibility on his shoulders. Darkness deepened, diminishing visibility, making navigation treacherous. The ice, once a mirror, became deceptive, full of shadows and invisible fissures under the waning light. Anya, with heightened sensitivity, was the silent guide. She felt the slightest vibrations of the ice, alerting the others with precise gestures about thin or cracked areas where the danger of giving way was imminent. Her eyes, which did not hear, saw with uncommon clarity, detecting patterns and dangers. Lena, Blindly trusting her mother, translated her gestures to Kyle and the other villagers. It was a ballet of non-verbal communication, forged in years of coexistence, love, and mutual need. At Anya's every warning, Kyle adjusted the route. Dogs followed. The village, an organism, advanced, trusting. The cold was an ordeal, unity, a shield. Night fell, stars shone. The caravan stopped for rest and tea. Illuminated faces showed weariness and determination. Anya watched her grandchildren. Hope sustained her. The legend strengthened the people's soul. The caravan stopped for a brief rest. The hot tea, hastily prepared with the little firewood they had brought, was a balm for dry throats and frozen bodies. Anya, sitting on a hide, watched her grandchildren. Bor, the youngest, was not there, but the image of his hungry eyes was a constant presence in her mind. Kyle, beside her, drank the tea eagerly, steam rising from his mug into the icy air. His shoulders, once so tense, relaxed for an instant, but worry still nestled in his young eyes. Lena, with a tired smile, offered her mother more tea, a gesture of affection that Anya felt more than saw. The warmth of the drink, the brief relief, was a reminder that even in the most brutal of adversities, small gestures of care could ignite a flame of hope. Anya thought of her husband, of what he would say. He would be proud not only of her, but of all the people. Their unity was the true strength, the silent answer to the relentless winter. She felt Kyle's gaze on her and, with a slight nod of her head, conveyed her strength. The young man nodded, understanding the unspoken message. The rest was short. The darkness of the Yakutian night did not allow for long pauses. With renewed determination, the caravan regrouped. The dogs, invigorated by the brief rest, pulled the sleds with a new vigor, their muffled howls echoing in the icy vastness. The cold, however, had intensified, and each breath was a breath of ice that burned her lungs. Anya walked ahead, her bare feet inside her fur boots, more sensitive to the vibrations of the ice. Every crack, every tremor, was a message she deciphered with the wisdom of decades. The ice was an open book to her, and she read its pages with a precision no eye could match. Lena, always by her side, observed her mother's movements, translating her gestures to Kale and the others. "More to the left," Lena gestured, repeating Anya's warning. "Thin ice." Kale, with a nod, adjusted the dog's route, fully trusting the elder. Fatigue was a fog that tried to obscure everyone's minds. Muscles ached, eyelids felt heavy, but the sight of the sleds laden with meat was a constant reminder of what was at stake. With each step, the village grew a little closer, hunger a little more distant. Anya felt the energy of her people, the collective strength that propelled them. She looked at the sky, where the stars shone with a cruel intensity, millions of points of light in a sea of darkness. The beauty was overwhelming, but also a reminder of nature's vastness and indifference. Suddenly, a stronger, more urgent vibration ran through the ice. Anya stopped abruptly, raising her hand. Her eyes swept the darkness, searching for the source of the danger. It wasn't the ice cracking, but something different, a rhythmic and distant tremor. Lena, noticing the change in her mother's posture, asked with gestures, "What is it, mother?" Anya pointed to the horizon, where a faint, flickering light began to appear. It wasn't dawn, it was the village. The sight of the light, however faint, sent a wave of relief and renewed energy through the caravan. The dogs, as if sensing the proximity of home, howled with more strength. The villagers, exhausted, found a new breath. The end of the journey was in sight. Hope, which had kept them warm on the coldest night, now materialized as a point of light on the horizon. The legend of Anya, the savior, was about to be completed, not as a solitary feat, but as the celebration of an entire people's resilience. The village light, once a faint, flickering point, now expanded, revealing the silhouettes of the small hide and wood huts enveloped in a haze of smoke rising from the campfires. It was the promise of warmth, safety, life. The sight sent a wave of adrenaline through Anya, dissipating her fatigue for an instant. Her feet, which had dragged before, found a new rhythm, propelled by the urgency of home. Lena, by her side, let out an audible sigh of relief, her shoulders relaxing a little, but her eyes still fixed on her mother, searching for any sign of weakness. Anya, feeling her daughter's gaze, simply shook her head, a gesture that she was fine, that she would endure to the end. Kyle, at the front, shouted a command to the dogs, his voice choked with emotion and effort. The animals, sensing the proximity of their destination, howled in response, pulling the sleds with renewed, almost desperate strength. The creak of wood on ice became a hymn of victory, echoing in the vast darkness of the Yakutian night. The other villagers, who were pushing the heavier sleds, also found a last breath. Their faces, once contorted by pain and exhaustion, now bore faint smiles, but full of hope. They looked at each other, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared, of the ordeal they were about to overcome. Enya felt the vibrations of the ice beneath her feet, but now they were different. They were not warnings of danger, but the familiar tremor of the earth near the village, the footprints of her people, the promise of solid ground. The air, though still icy, seemed less biting, perhaps due to the smoke from the campfires mingling with it, or perhaps simply due to the proximity of human warmth. She thought of Bor, of his thin face, of the eyes that waited for her. The image of her grandson, once a burden of responsibility, was now the sweetest of rewards. As they approached the first huts, figures began to emerge from the darkness. They were the elders who had remained, the women with their small children, their faces pale and worried. The silence broke into murmurs of surprise and then into shouts of joy and relief. Anya didn't hear the sounds, but she felt the impact of the vibrations on the ice, the collective tremor of the ground, the air vibrating with emotion. She saw arms extend, tears roll down frozen faces. Lena ran forward, gesticulating frantically, explaining what had happened, pointing to Anya and the laden sleds. Kale, with an exhausted but triumphant smile, stopped the dogs right in the center of the village. The sight of the sleds, crammed with dark, frozen meat, was a breathtaking spectacle. The 5,000 kilograms of buffalo, once an insurmountable mountain, were now palpable salvation, the answer to the hunger that tormented them. Children, previously hidden behind their mothers, now ran to the sleds, their eyes wide with wonder and hope. Bor, little Bor, was among them. His eyes, once sunken and sad, now shone with a light Anya hadn't seen in weeks. He ran to her, his thin little arms wrapping around her legs. Anya knelt, hugging her grandson with a strength that came from the depths of her soul. She felt the warmth of the boy's body, the tremor of his silent crying, and knew that it had all been worth it. The villagers gathered, touching the meat, some kneeling in gratitude. The legend of Anya, the deaf elder who defied winter and death, was no longer a distant story. It was the reality unfolding before their eyes, the living proof of Yakutian resilience. She was not just the savior, she was the personification of hope, the flame that rekindled life amidst the deepest darkness. The village, united by her courage and sacrifice, was saved. The most brutal winter in history had been defied, and life, somehow, had found a way. The village, united by her courage and sacrifice, was saved. The most brutal winter in history had been defied, and life, somehow, had found a way. Bor's embrace, tight and full of a childlike gratitude that transcended hunger, was the final seal of victory for Anya. She felt the small body trembling in her arms, no longer from cold, but from a deep relief that resonated in her own chest. With a gentle kiss on her grandson's hair, Anya rose, sweeping the faces of the village with her eyes, with serene dignity. The buzz of voices, inaudible to her, was a visible chorus of emotions. The villagers, once pale, now bore a renewed glow. The meat, piled on the sleds, was a tangible miracle. Without losing time, Kyle, with youthful authority, organized the distribution. He gestured to the men, indicating that the meat should be taken to the larger huts for cutting and storage. Lena, beside her mother, translated Kyle's gestures, her eyes moist with pride. Anya watched, feeling the vibrations of hurried footsteps and unloaded sleds. The strong, metallic scent of blood, mingled with the smoke from the campfires, filled the air, a perfume of hope. Women with sharp knives began to work under the flickering light of the oil lamps. Every cut into the frozen meat was an act of faith, a promise of sustenance. The children, even the youngest, helped, carrying small pieces or watching with wide eyes, hunger replaced by anticipation. That night, the village did not sleep. The work continued tirelessly, but now it was a celebration. Large cauldrons were placed over the fire, and the first pieces of fresh meat were cooked. The aroma of hot, rich, and substantial soup spread, warming bodies and souls. Anya, sitting near the fire, felt the heat crackle on her skin. Lena brought her a steaming bowl, and Anya, with trembling hands, took it. The first sip was a balm, a warmth that spread through her being, dispelling cold and exhaustion. Boar, nestled beside her, ate his portion eagerly, now with satisfaction. Anya stroked her grandson's hair, a gentle smile on her lips. The improvised table, made of hides on the floor of the communal hut, was full. Everyone ate in reverent silence, savoring every bite of the meal. Gazes met, full of gratitude and a new sense of community. Anya felt the energy around her, the human connection strengthened with every mouthful. She didn't hear the words of thanks, but she saw them in the moist eyes, in the gestures of respect, in the people's gaze. She was no longer just Anya, the deaf elder. She was Anya, the savior, the living legend. The burden of responsibility had not disappeared, but now it was shared, transformed into an unbreakable bond. Winter was still long, but the deepest darkness had been overcome. The 5,000-kilogram buffalo was not just food, it was a symbol that human resilience, guided by ancestral wisdom and love, could defy the most relentless nature. The village had been reborn, stronger and more united than ever, forged in ice and the courage of one woman. The flame of hope, lit by Anya, burned in every Yakutian heart, promising a future. The flame of hope, lit by Anya, burned in every Yakutian heart, promising a future. The days that followed the caravan's arrival were filled with hard work, but now imbued with a renewed and vital purpose. The buffalo meat, carefully processed and stored, ensured that hunger no longer haunted the huts. Each portion, however small, was savored with reverence, a constant reminder of the sacrifice and courage that had brought it to all. Anya, though still exhausted, felt a deep peace. Her body, marked by the scars of time and struggle, now carried the weight of a collective victory. She did not seek recognition, but she saw it in the eyes of her grandchildren, in Kale's silent respect, and in Lena's loving devotion. Her deafness, once in isolation, now seemed to amplify her connection to the world in other ways. She felt the pulsation of the village, the constant rhythm of hearts beating in unison. Kyle, with the responsibility of a leader, grew in stature. His shoulders, once tense with worry, now carried the weight of leadership with a new wisdom, forged under Anya's watchful eye. He consulted his grandmother for every important decision, not only out of respect, but recognizing the depth of her intuition. Anya, with slow and thoughtful gestures, offered her advice, and Kale translated it to the people, ensuring that the elder's voice, even silent, continued to guide the village. Lena, in turn, became the essential bridge between the two, her eyes and hands as expressive as her words. She organized the women, supervised storage and distribution, and ensured Anya had the rest and comfort she deserved. Winter, though relentless, began to yield. Temperatures, still icy, didn't seem so oppressive. Sunlight lingered a little longer each day, and the promise of spring, once a distant dream, began to emerge on the pale horizon. The villagers, fed and warmed, dedicated themselves to other tasks, repairing sleds, preparing hides, and telling stories around the campfires. Anya's stories of the epic hunt and the struggle against the ice were retold with passion, inspiring the young and strengthening everyone's spirit. Little Boar, was the personification of renewed hope. His eyes, once empty, now shone with the joy of childhood. He followed Anya everywhere, clinging to her fur skirt, a constant reminder of the future she had saved. Anya, feeling the small hand in hers, smiled. Life continued, and the legend of her courage intertwined with the very fabric of the village, an unbreakable thread of resilience. The village not only survived, it prospered in spirit. The most brutal winter in history had not broken them, but had forged them, making them stronger, more united. Anya, the deaf elder, was no longer just a survivor. She was a pillar, a symbol of indomitable Yakutian strength, living proof that love, wisdom, and human connection could truly move mountains, or in this case save an entire people from the icy abyss. Her legend would echo for generations, a whisper on the icy wind, a warmth in every Yakutian heart, reminding them that hope never dies, as long as there is courage to ignite it. Anya's legend, a whisper on the icy wind, became the lullaby sung to newborns and the tale of courage narrated to the young around the campfires. It was not just a story of survival, but a living testament to the unwavering strength of her people. The village, once on the brink of the abyss, flourished with a new vitality. With each dawn, Anya felt the earth beneath her feet, no longer as a battlefield, but as a safe home, pulsing with the life she had helped preserve. Her days, though calmer, were still filled with purpose. She spent hours teaching the children, not with words, but with the touch of her wrinkled hands, showing them how to feel the vibrations of the ice, how to read nature's subtle signs. Her little boar, was her most diligent student. He followed her like a shadow, his curious eyes absorbing every gesture. Anya took him outside, even on the coldest days, and together they sat on the ice, their hands joined as she guided him to feel the distant tremors, the silent sounds of the world. He didn't hear, but he learned to feel, to perceive the world in a way few could. Kyle, now a respected leader, continued to seek Anya's wisdom. He visited her every morning, sitting at her feet as she prepared tea, and with patient gestures, she advised him on hunts, weather forecasting, and village organization. Her advice was always thoughtful, rooted in a lifetime of observation and respect for nature. Kale, in turn, transmitted this wisdom to the people, and the village prospered under his leadership, a reflection of Anya's silent strength. Lena, her daughter, was the pulsating heart of the family and community. She cared for Anya with unwavering devotion, ensuring her comfort and well-being. But Lena also became a strong voice in the village, her experience alongside her mother in the epic hunt, lending her a natural authority. She organized the women, supervised food preparation, and kept the community's spirit high with her contagious energy. Winter finally bid farewell, giving way to a timid but promising spring. The lake ice began to crack and melt, revealing the dark water beneath. The first green shoots appeared on the tundra, and animals began to return. The village, now well-fed and united, observed the changing seasons with a new sense of gratitude and hope. They had faced the most brutal of winters and emerged stronger. Anya, sitting at the edge of the lake, watched the ice melt. There were no more gigantic buffalo in sight, but the memory of that day remained, not as a trauma, but as a milestone of their resilience. She touched the cold water, feeling the life being reborn. Her legend was not about a single act of bravery, but about the ability of a people to unite, to trust the wisdom of their elders, and to find hope even in the deepest darkness. She was living proof that human connection, love for family, and altruism could transform the impossible into reality. Her legacy was not just the meat that fed the village, but the flame of hope she ignited in every Yakutian heart, burning eternally, reminding them that together they could overcome any winter, any adversity. Anya's village, the deaf elders' village, would flourish for many generations, a beacon of resilience and love in the icy heart of Yakutia.